on the truck again today. In fact, we're actually taking the whole front end apart because I misjudged my timing on the engine when I was putting it back together, and it's too far advanced. So I have to get the radiator and the intercooler out of the way so I can take the timing cover off and re-time the injection pump to the engine. I got the coolant drain now. Got the bumper pulled, the transmission cooler is loose, air conditioner loose. Yeah, I need to get this timing cover off so I can line up the timing marks and actually time it correctly instead of guessing. And then straight underneath the alternator here, it's still leaking a little bit of coolant, so we gotta take all of that crap off so we can get to that. I just pulled the nuts off for the battery cable. Take this end loose, flop that out of the way, get the hoses out of the way, and I'll catch you up after I get some of that boring stuff out of the way. This is one of the parts I just sped the video up in. It's not really a time lapse. Just getting the radiator pulled out. I had a little trouble figuring out what it was getting caught on, but as tall as I am, it's pretty easy to get a hold of the radiator on both ends and just get it yanked out. Also get the fan shroud pulled out in this clip and the belt. I don't want to pick it out. So right there, pretty much on the other side of this little pin, that's where the O-ring is that's leaking. And it's leaking out between the mount and the block. And just making a general mess of everything. So I gotta take that whole bracket off and then figure out, see if I can find a little bit thicker flat rubber O-ring, or see if I can find some gasket material to shim that O-ring out a little bit so it'll quit leaking. But I cannot tighten this bracket down anymore. It's as tight as it'll go, and it still drips a little. So we're gonna get that off. Got to get the fan off so I can get that front cover pulled off again, and then we can time the engine. There, I got it apart enough you can see that O-ring stuck up against the side of the bracket. It fits in a little notch on the block, and I'm not sure which side's actually leaking. So I gotta finish getting that other bolt out, and we'll take a little better look at it. There's a little gunk up on top of the O-ring right there. And of course the block still had some coolant in there, so it was dripping down here anyways. It might actually be leaking between the O-ring and this thing. You can kind of see the outline of where the O-ring sits. And I thought I had cleaned it up pretty good. I wonder if maybe there's some pits right there that I didn't get out because I didn't want to sand too much out of it. So maybe what I'll do is dry this off, put some RTV on the O-ring, glue it in place with some RTV, and let it sit inside over the night, so maybe it'll cure correctly. So you can see it sits in a little groove So I don't know if maybe I could find just a tiny little shim or thin O-ring to put in there. Kind of double it up and really get a good seal. I'm just not real sure. So I have to wait for the wife to get back from her errands so I can use the Jeep to go get some stuff. So we'll take this fan off next because it's going to be a pain in the ass. Because it just always is. After I got the fan off, you can see the pulleys actually rubbing up against this timing cover. Or it might actually be, oh yeah, that's really loose. So I guess it's actually a good thing I'm taking this apart, because that would have been no good if that had came apart. So it looks like it's just this part, and the net was kind of wobbling up against that timing cover. So I suppose that's a little bit of a crisis averted. And if you haven't seen the inside the front end of one of these, crankshaft runs the camshaft and the oil pump. This is the vacuum pump and the power steering pump. And then this gear is the injection pump. Now, you don't have to take that cover off if you know what your timing is set at. You just have to find your top dead center, and then you can just pull this gear loose, adjust your timing, and then put everything back, tighten everything up. I made the mistake and eyeballed turning the crank a little bit, and I went way too far, I'm pretty sure. So since I'm not 100% sure where my timing is at currently, I'm going to put the harmonic balancer back on, and then I'll bar the engine over till I find my timing pin and the injection pump and see what it says, and then I can line up the timing marks on these two gears to find top dead center, and I can adjust my timing correctly instead of eyeballing it. So that was a mistake, but I'm kind of glad we had to pull that fan off because I didn't realize that was rubbing. So a couple of little mistakes, and well, sometimes that happens. You kind of get in a hurry, or you get excited, or you're exhausted and tired of fighting with it, and you make a mistake. So spending the weekend fixing it. So apparently I completely messed up and didn't actually get enough timing. As you can see, 5 degrees is a little short. And I had thought when I had put it back together I had lined it up correctly. But I was apparently way off. I have the little timing tab in the pump showing, so I'll put the timing thing in the pump, and then we'll break that nut loose and back it off some more. This isn't time lapse, this is me just speeding up the footage I had, doing it at regular speed. Spent a fair bit of time fighting with it. If you have the correct engine barring tool, which I do not have, this probably would have been a lot smoother. Or if I had someone who could help me and take my big pry bar and turn the engine over off of the flywheel instead of trying to do it on the front while watching the gauge at the same time, probably would have been a little smoother. And due to the engine compression ratio, I struggled a bit to get this thing cranked over to where it needed to be, to have it set at 16 degrees timing, which is what some of the research I've done online kind of is everybody's agreement on where the engine gets the best fuel economy at. You can go a little further. The video I seen on Power Driven Diesel's site on how they time the engines, you can go up to 22 degrees. That's really more for
pullers and race trucks. I'm not building the truck for maximum power. I want a decent amount of power, but I still wanted to get good fuel economy, which is also part of the reason why I went with a 6-speed automatic with a better overdrive. The truck actually surprisingly ran decent at 5 degrees timing, but the fuel economy was terrible, and it didn't really have any low-end pull.
I made a paint mark when I torqued the gear down to make a timing mark on the pump we're right at 16 degrees off of this camshaft tooth. So hopefully that'll work a lot better. Get out of there, spider. Oops. Huh. How the hell did you get in there? Through the spider. Come out. There we go. I really don't want a spider in the engine. Not that he'd affect much. So there's timing marks already on the camshaft gear and the crank gear. So now with the white paint, I'll know where it's at. And then I marked the gear, the nut, and the shaft. So I can check to see if any of this is slipping. I torqued it down to 145 foot-pounds. So if this slips on the shaft at all, this paint marks will at least tell me if that's not tight enough, or if maybe this lock washer's failing. So now we'll just button it all up. You can actually see that oil field tube. You can just unscrew that and you'll see all of this right here. So now the fun part is putting it back together. I couldn't find a little different O-ring for this, so I'm going to clean it up again. And I got some 90-minute set RTV. So I'll put just a thin bead, a sealant around this, and hopefully that'll get me a good seal on the block. Yeah, on here. And hopefully that'll quit leaking. It's not leaking a lot. It's enough to be aggravating. And as much time and money as I put in this damn thing, I'd like it to at least not leak any fluids. Might not win any races, win any awards, but I'd at least like it to not mark its territory every time it comes to a stop. Or you start it back up. The timing wheel I got from powerdrivendiesel.com. That and the gear puller. I'll show you the gear puller. It's a very simple gear puller. You thread these into the gear, tighten this down, pops it right off. That and the magnetic timing gauge. That was $90. I think it was $103 with tax and shipping to me. So if you want to do some timing work on a 12 valve, it's $103 well spent. The next day I got everything kind of buttoned up in the dark. So that's why there's no film of putting it back together. Got to fill up the coolant and put the bumper back on. Should be good to go. Got the trans cooler mounted back up, and the cable running back across. So we do got the gauges mounted. Not 100% happy with how the paint came out. So I'll probably try to color match it a little better, or maybe shoot some flat clear over the top of it. That might dull it down enough to match the interior a little better. I'm not sure how good you can read them. The farmost left gauge is the trans temp. Middle gauge is fuel pressure, and the one closest to the steering wheel is going to be air pressure. My air compressor I installed kind of acting up a little bit, so I don't think it's happy with the way I installed it. So I'll have to re-engineer that a little bit, but the gauges are really easily readable. I can see the fuel pressure gauge pretty easy. And the temperature gauge. We're just got the truck started and getting it warmed up. The engine warms up quite a bit faster than the transmission. I was hoping we wouldn't have any traffic out here on this county road so I could feed her a little beans, but apparently everybody wanted to go out this way.